There's only really one place to begin. What happened at the end of the first half was we witnessed one of the great moments in rugby union history. Rhys Carré bursting down the wing, show and go to Robert Baloucoune. Big Bob Baloucoune, downgraded to regular Robert, left for dead by Rhys Carré in a glorious display of pure rugby and also loveliness.
I couldn't believe it. I think I celebrated that more as a rugby fan than as a Wales fan at that moment. I'm sure lots of people around the globe were jumping up and down for joy when Rhys Carré, with his smile beaming on his face when he couldn't believe what he'd just done. But also, the guy is just a genuinely brilliant athlete. So he does deserve to have a big moment like that. His third game on the trot that he scored in for Wales.
Only the fifth prop in history to score 3 games in a row.
Wow.
And I think the second in the professional era.
Wow.
So in the first for Wales.
Is that in the Six Nations? Or
ever.
All international rugby.
All international rugby, first in the Six Nations. First time a prop's ever scored consecutive 3 games in a row.
That's no coincidence,
Yeah.
And obviously, we can make as many jokes about this, Rhys Carré, very easily could end up in the 13 jersey for Wales if he's not careful, if he carries on doing stuff like this. But genuinely, it takes a really impressive athlete to be able to do that and to be able to scrummage and do all the other things he does as well as that.
It's one of the things about this try, right, is it's so easy to go, when you're in our position, to look at it and go, OK, it's a really smart play by Wales, right, is they work down to the blind side, they have a big carry in there, they work one phase in field, and because Wales' pattern generally is you work one side, then you work the other way, Ireland leave that side lighter, they've got Tyke Furlong as the last forward out because the general forwards have either been hit, they're on the deck, or they've worked in field to watch for the big carrying group. Instead, Dan Edwards calls it short side, quite a smart play, and they target Jameson Gibson Park. He gets off the feet, and that means that Furlong has to fold onto the other side, and he is on his own with Baloucoune. And Wales have been using Rhys Carré in that role all Six Nations, right? It cost them a try against France, was having him out wide and then be able to exploit that lack of pace. Dupont and Sogbe getting away through that. However, in the situation, it's perfect because it is the most surprising thing that Baloucoune can possibly see in the situation, even though he had to defend it a few minutes earlier. It's so easy to go into the nitty-gritty and go, OK, there are genuine reasons for the situation occurring, and Wales have been looking to use him as an edge forward because he's so good at carrying out wide. And what they're looking for there, really, is for him to blast through Baloucoune and make an extra 5 metres versus number 8. What we get instead is a moment of glory, and I don't want to go into it too much. I don't want to let daylight in upon magic,
Yeah.
And it's a smart pattern play. It's Wales using Carré in a role I think a lot of teams wouldn't be brave enough to use, but fair play to Matt Sherritt for thinking no, I believe in this guy and I know this guy can play this role, and them taking the roughest move. As I say, against France, using him as an edge forward on and moving him out there on kick return meant that when France won the ball back, they were able to score off it. However, it also gives us moments like this, and it's so good and it's so worth everything that we saw on the other side.
Absolutely, and hopefully we'll have more moments like this to come from Rhys Carré.
Hope so.
As much as I'm sure he wouldn't promise them. I think he's pretty happy with one.
He did call it a fluke to scrum 5 after the game.
I wouldn't go that far.
No.
He's an incredible athlete, and also he's done stuff not this level of extreme, but he's done stuff like this for a while now. So yeah, chuffed for him, and overall chuffed for Wales because obviously we're going to talk about Ireland in a little bit as well. But Wales came out of this game in credit, and I, as a Welsh fan, genuinely came out of this game and didn't feel sad. I was I've actually just enjoyed it because it felt like watching the Welsh national rugby team play.
It felt like having Wales back. It felt like watching a real international rugby team playing over a real international rugby team. It's what Wales Island games used to feel like, right, for decades going back, and then over the last few years, that's kind of very much changed. And I think Ireland played well. This was a performance in which they closed the game out. They saw what was coming for them. To their credit, there was no level on which they underestimated Wales. Right, they took them seriously as a threat. They saw what they did to Scotland, or almost did to Scotland at least, and took them seriously. And they played exactly their style with this level of pace and intensity they required. Otherwise, they would have lost that game. And fair play to Ireland. However, this Welsh performance I thought was exceptional. I thought it was the best Welsh performance since the World Cup, even better than last weekend Scotland, where obviously they were close to winning the game and in better position at half-time. But I still think defensively this was as good a Welsh performance as you've seen going back to the Fiji in the World Cup, right, when they put in a world record number of tackles. Alex Mann in this game broke the Six Nations record that stood for over a decade for most tackles in the game, previously held by Luke Charteris and Guillaume Guirado. And this was like an incredible effort because even though the tackle count, 32 tackles, is immense, it doesn't cover moments like this. Ireland spot this is on to go wide, spot it's on to play. However, Alex manages to defend us like a centre, and the effort he takes to get out here and make the tackle, initially defending the middle of the field and then working out, closing off the space, never allowing himself to be bought, just shows like what an intelligent rugby player and how hard he works even beyond that.
So we've talked about in the Tandy era, it's something Tandy's in fact talked about, the fact that he wants to build up his game plan bit by bit.
Yes.
He didn't come in, as some coaches do this, so he didn't come in and just go, here is everything we're going to do, so every component of this, I expect you to be able to do this by game one, because it overwhelms players.
It was the problem with Wayne Pivac, right?
Yeah.
Wayne Pivac's Wales, was he tried to implement everything from the first 2 games.
Or for instance, like Eddie Jones's Australia,
Yeah.
A lot of teams have crashed and burned when people have kind of tried to implement too much. And Steve Tandy has said, he's been very transparent. He's going to go one campaign at a time and teach them little bits. And so, for example, in the autumn, it was the attack in the 22, he looked at as like the primary thing and a little bit of the kicking game and rounding that out. And in this campaign, it's very clear that he wants to build up this defence gradually, And in terms of how Wales defended before this campaign, there were 2 different styles of defence. One of them was much more akin to what he did with Scotland, which was kind of a bit of a contained defence, which was your first sort of 3 to 5 steps are very aggressive, and after that you kind of hold off a little bit, just in case they do anything funny, do anything kind of fancy that can fox you out and can get, not just beyond the gain line, but create space either in behind or out wide or whatever. It means that if you kind of cool off a little bit, you can meet them and you kind of catch them on the gain line.
The idea is that whereas like a 9 South Africa style defence wants to, one phase you might lose 5 metres, but the next phase you'll make 20 metres.
Yes.
Instead, Tandy's system wants to catch you 1 or 2 metres behind the gain line every single time.
Yes, and when you have breakdown threats like Jack Morgan or, people who might blast the rucks or whatever, the opposition might make an error or they might lose the ball. You might win it back from them. The other style of defence is much more, you mentioned Jacques Nienaber's South Africa there, a very aggressive blitz, and we've seen slightly less of this. We've seen like little bits where this can happen, but obviously Wales under Sean Edwards, 7 years ago now since he left, they were incredibly successful with that sort of a blitz defence. And, it's something that we've talked before about. Rassie Erasmus talks about the Welsh people as like, they're incredibly like just hardworking and just like these big moments where they go after and kind of hammer people and punch above their weight and that kind of thing. And in this game, we saw the 2 blended together in the perfect manner.
I think it's fantastic. I really like the way Wales have started defending. So we saw little touch of this throughout the rest of the Six Nations, but it feels like it's really come together now. It's something Dewi Lake talked about a bit post-game, is how much they're adding to the game every week and how much they're learning in between weeks. So the system is essentially that initial containment defence for the first few phases, right? And they will soak up the first few phases because generally that's when teams throw the best ideas at you, right? If they've got a great strike move, they'll run it over the first 3 phases and then they sit off. Then they start to lose shape. And then once you get to phase about 3 or 4, Wales attack, they hunt, they become more aggressive as the phase count goes on. And I really like that. It's really smart.
The other thing about this is because the more phases you go through an attack, the less likely you are to have something really structured or something obvious. On first phase, you have, off a scrum, you have your 7 backs who are stood in the right positions. Off a line-out, you might have a couple of forwards that you dot into that, but you will plan around this. You will have pre-planned set plays. As you get further on, people have to slot into each other's positions, people have to make up for what each other's doing. It kind of will get a bit more messy. And what Wales are doing is relying on that possibility happening.
Yeah.
So this instance is a really good one because for the first few phases, Ireland, they're great at set moves. Strike plays, it's one of the things, they're one of the best teams in the world at this. And then you get to phase 4 or 5, Dav Jenkins comes in here and he slightly attacks the breakdown. He's not going for the turnover here, he's just going to slow the ball down.
Critically, he's the tackler, right? So everyone that wasn't involved in the tackle stands off and is a part of this main line. That allows everyone to get wide, everyone in set position. But Dav Jenkins is the tackler, and he just goes in at the breakdown and just tries to cause a mess. He's not trying to win the turnover. He just wants to slow this ball down by a second or so. Because Jenkins has disrupted this ball, but also critically, because everyone's on their feet, they can spread out. So look how wide the forwards are out here, right? The furthest out forward is set pretty wide, which allows then Thomas Williams in this kind of wing position here, as they use him as kind of an extra central winger all the time. He flies up. And he can, because his forwards are on their feet, they're not being dragged into the ruck, and he just gets in McCluskey's eye line. That means that McCluskey looks here, what he wants to throw is the flat ball to Balakoon, who'll explode onto it, get on the outside. However, if he goes for that, there's a decent chance that Thomas Williams picks off the intercept, and so he goes, okay, I'm going to have to float it over him, and the pass goes behind Balogun, lands, bounces, at which point Josh Adams, coming into the line from the backfield, can fly up and be incredibly aggressive, catch them behind. Conan just about regathers it, pops up to Balogun and gets smashed and touched by Williams and Adams. Like, it's a really great bit of D. And we see the same thing shortly afterwards when here...
They send it over the top to Jack Conan. He has a carry. He gets over the gain line. Wales don't take the piss and try and, like, smoke him behind the gain line. Next couple of phases, Wales kind of let Ireland meet them on the gain line, and they're okay with that.
Yeah.
And then you get to phase 4 or 5. Dav Jenkins comes in here and he slightly attacks the breakdown. He's not going for the turnover here. He's just going to slow the ball down. Ireland go through one more phase and the ball is a little bit slower then on top of that. It's kind of a bit of a domino effect on top of that.
Rhys Carré is the tackler. He gets back up to his feet and just contests. Just make sure he's a nightmare to be cleared out. Like, he's not looking for a turnover. He just want to make it as difficult as possible for the Irish clean out to get rid of him. And then this slows the ball down and allows the centres to strike.
This phase is when Wales go for the hammer blow. And Eddie James absolutely fires out of the line alongside Joe Hawkins. The improvement of this centre partnership as the tournament's gone on has been outstanding. Against France, we saw the French centres getting on the outside, Jalabert getting on the outside of them quite a lot. No such thing in this game. It was the two of them here just like firing together, a gang tackle from the pair of them, and Ireland then have sloppy ball. You know, their ball press gets difficult and they start making errors off the back of that.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really important to this is the role of the wingers, because the wingers are kind of the key leaders in here. Ellis Mee came back into the team for this game, and you mentioned there that one word eye-line. It's something that Ellis Mee did brilliantly. Even without needing to make a tackle, his defence here was brilliant. So Jameson Gibson Park picks up the ball, and as soon as he does, Ellis Mee is straight away into the passing channel. And the thing is, even if because Gibson Park has such a range of passes, kicks, you know, even the running game himself, players who can come run different lines off him. But Ellis Mee just creates that tiny moment of indecision. So instead, Jameson Gibson Park throws a horror pass here. It goes behind Jack Conan and he drops it into touch. Exactly the same here. Jack Crowley comes around the corner. Ellis Mee, he's in the eye line. So Jack Crowley, who's an excellent passer of the ball, throws not as good a pass as he normally would. Ireland are then thrown off their game. He did this all day, Ellis Mee. He was constantly just coming up, being really annoying, and just making sure that when Crowley got the ball, when Gibson Park got the ball, they were just looking up and seeing red jerseys surrounding them all the time.
You've rarely seen a player have a better game and a more impactful game without touching the ball and making a tackle.
Yeah.
Like, or winning a turnover, contesting a ruck. Like, without actually being directly involved, he was constantly shutting down space, Ellis Mee. Really, really smart, really, really, like, intelligent decision-making consistently. And then you look at the work rate once they get onto the try line, right? So this is perhaps the big turning point of the game for me, was Derry Lake winning a critical turnover when Ireland, they just had tried disallowed. They've been battering away at the line. It was 7-3. This was a moment they could kind of kill off any Welsh momentum. And instead, Wales hold out, as you say, they go for that kind of soak-up defence repeatedly, and then we see here. So Alex Mann shoots out of line. He just gets up, and what he looks to do is just get in the way of this tip-on pass from Osborne, because he knows this is the lightest guy in this forward pod, right? He's got McCloskey here, he's got Furlong alongside, and then he stays in the way once Osborne carries into contact. Jim Botham's tackle choice is exceptional. He goes for the chop, which presents it on a plate for Derry Lake to get over the ball and win his turnover, because Furlong can't get there in time because Mann is physically just in his way, and Osborne drift out to be 10 on the next phase, which is a big part of our system. Like, just work rate, consistently getting there, whereas win the turnover, Thomas Williams slaps it long, and before too long, later on, you know, him and Ellis Mee follow up, and Alex Mann himself comes up and wins a turnover on Gary Ringos, who picks and goes from the ruck. Wales have a 100-metre turnaround, like they go for the corner and are on the try line, and it leads to Rhys Carré getting held up for what could have been, you know, a historic brace, 4 tries in 3 games. But this was almost like, if Rhys Carré gets this ball down, this is a 100-metre turnaround from just a little bit of extra work rate from Alex Mann. Same thing we saw in his intercept, where he works so hard to just get across from having been involved in the previous tackle and work around into position.
We talked about this a little bit on the video on the Women's Rugby World Cup final last year, where basically, for anybody who hasn't watched that, the matchup was, there was an incredibly physical team in England whose set piece was like the best in the world by such a long way and had like ball players all across the park, right? Against Canada, who've played the fastest brand of rugby by any international team in history, male or female. And the way that England stopped them defensively is doing exactly what you just said about Alex Mann there. So when you take a ball, say I've taken the ball from that way as a ball carrier, I want to try and carry it away from the traffic there. I want to try and bounce outwards in my forward carry. The reason for that is, if I go back inside this way, I'm likely going back towards their heavier players, their jacklers, the people who've not had to work as hard, you know. It means that it's just sort of 5 metres that someone like a Derry Lake has to travel in order to get over that ball. Whereas what Alex Mann's done there, he's just laid a bit of a trap. He's got onto that outside, so Jamie Osborne looks up and goes, well, I can't carry that way. All the space is back there, you know. There's red jerseys there. There's a bit more space before there's red jerseys there. And as you mentioned, Jim Botham, brilliant turnover assist, going at the knees. And he knows he's got just enough time to roll away there. Because Alex Mann has also, as well as forcing Osborne back inside, created a little bit of separation between Osborne and the 2 players who would be rucking over him. Yeah. So instead, he goes back the way he came, Derry Lake straight over the ball, turnover, and as you mentioned, Wales get down the pitch and deploy the move that has been successful for Rhys Carry to score in the previous 2 games. Fair play to them trying it again, but also brilliant second effort by Caelan Doris to get under the ball here with a triple up on Carry.
I do have to ask the question though. This move is designed so you have Derry Lake carries first, then Wales' next 2 biggest carriers in Aaron Wainwright and Rhys Carry, both come on flood lines running completely different angles either side, meaning that the defence having to watch both and bam, which one do they hit? They've hit Carry every single time they've ran this move. Yeah. And you kind of wonder whether they have to run this move next week or they would have been more successful this week if they ran it and hit Wainwright instead. Just a little quibble.
It's a fair question.
Little quibble, you know, like maybe some variety when you're running the same move that you keep scoring off again and again and again.
So it ain't broke, don't fix it, but also like Caelan Doris is there to make sure it is broke.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He's good at breaking things, is Caelan Doris. And yeah, he does an exceptional job alongside James Ryan of holding that ball up.
However, Ireland did manage to break down this Welsh defence a handful of times, starting with the Jacob Stockdale try.
Yes. So this is another situation where it's easy to point the finger and blame certain players for this. But ultimately, this system, it's so specific in terms of what it demands. And obviously that slightly changes when you run your own try line as well. Because when you run your own try line, you can't really afford to contain as much. You have to kind of go for the juggler and push your opposition back. And so if you find yourself in a little moment where 2 players make ever so slightly different decisions, you may concede a little bit of ground.
Yeah. So if you look at this try just cold, it looks like it's just Dan Edwards falling off a tackle. I think ultimately this is the 2 halfbacks kind of, I don't know if it's a lack of communication or something, but it leads to both of them go for different decisions. So Williams flies up really hard to try and make the big hit, and Edwards stands off a little bit because critically, Thomas Williams the entire time is watching 9, then looks up at his man McCloskey, and Dan Eds looks behind and he spots Jack Crowley running a really brilliant line. So naturally he's a 10, he knows he runs it himself all the time. So Crowley's body language is superb, but McCloskey's is even better. So McCloskey looks, even on every single angle, like he's about to throw this out the back to Crowley, who's running around, running on this arc line. So both Rhys Samet outside, who's only just got back into line, having been working across from the far side of the field, and Edwards are both watching Crowley. And because Edwards is watching 2 guys at once, and critically, Williams hasn't tried to help him up by watching 2 guys as well. He's gone all in on McCloskey, trying to put pressure on that pass. It means that Edwards is left going, okay, I'm kind of like 25% of me's watching Crowley, 75% watching Stockdale. 75 isn't good enough on Jacob Stockdale. He's a brilliant carrier. He explodes with that contact, particularly when he is a bigger man than Dan Edwards.
It's a really unselfish line by Crowley, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because he turns that from 100% to 75, as you say, of that tackle. And that is enough for Stockdale to break through. And it's his timing on this. Because also Lewis Rhys Samet is kind of catching up and getting into the defensive line at the end. He's only just in position here, which means if the ball does flip out the back here to Crowley, it's not like Zamet's just coming up and nailing him straight away. He still has to find his feet, get in the right position, and physically come off the line. And so that is why Dan Edwards can't put full trust in Lewis Rhys Samet to come up and make this tackle, much as I'm sure he would. That is the benefit of Crowley's line here. That's what it's his timing is so brilliant. And also, as well as that, all the lateral movement of the Irish forwards coming around the corner, preserving the space of all of these Welsh forwards who are coming up. They can't then all shuffle out, because otherwise they're just going to punch holes. This close to the try line, any small little gaps, with carries as good as the guys Ireland have in front of them here, like, you can't leave them that much space.
It's a really smart call by McCloskey and Crowley, because we see them run this same play a few minutes later, but in their own half. And it is a move that is consistently worth 10 metres. You just put a little bit of doubt in whoever's in that defensive position, be it the 10 or otherwise, is mind. In this case, it's Eddie James. And they got on the outside, they make 10 metres. And it's fine when you're defending in the opposition's half. However, when it's 10 metres from your own line, that is a problem, and Stockdale scores. And we saw a similar thing in Jack Crowley's own try, which was so well worked by James Gibson Park and Crowley himself.
Yes, so the critical thing is actually the penultimate phase before the try is scored, where Ireland have been working same way towards the posts for 3 or 4 phases at this stage, and then suddenly Gibson Park, just in one flash of genius, decides he's going to completely overrule the play and change it. Because Wales have got all the forwards towards the middle and the backs on the outside, as everybody likes to defend. And they have on this side Ellis Mee, who, as I say, has been running this defence so brilliantly, and Thomas Williams. Now, Ellis Mee shooting out of line and making quite ballsy decisions to get in the passing channel. Obviously, that's brilliant, but it does rely on having somebody else who is there as your kind of fail-safe. For instance, here, like this separate example where Dan Edwards and Thomas Williams both make a really good job of like shooting out of the line and force Ireland to make an error. This is reliant on having Alex Mann next to them as the catch-up defender, like the role that Sia Khaleesi plays for South Africa really well. And when Ireland do balls this up, Alex Mann goes up and picks it up. So it's relying on Ellis Mee as the kind of trigger puller in this case to have somebody to fall back on. So Jameson Gibson Park goes, let's target him, let's get him on the deck. And so he immediately bullets a ball back onto the blind side and gets his carriers motoring into Thomas Williams. It's a brilliant carry here by Timoney, making a really good carry, punches up to a couple of metres of the Welsh line.
And from there, Gibson Park then throws an absolute seed. And it's so easy to just look at this, right, and just go, yeah, he's just thrown the pass. The thing about this, right, is passes like this take an imagination beyond just the accuracy of throwing that ball and the speed of the pass and the kind of physical end of it, because he hasn't passed to anyone. He's thrown this into the space and just trusted Crowley would drift out onto that space, and sure enough, Crowley reacts. And it means, critically, that Ellis Mee is the only guy here, can't shoot up, he can't get into line, he can't do anything because the pass is coming kind of into that channel. He gets so far outside the first Welsh defender that it means Mee has no option whatsoever, and Crowley can go over for the try.
And very much the same for the final try scored by Jamie Osborne. There weren't many times in this game where Ireland managed to get on the outside of this Welsh defence because of that wing role that came up so hard. Both Josh Adams and Ellis Mee did this really well, and Thomas Williams when he was kind of filling in there when one of those two was in the backfield. But on this occasion, they do it brilliantly. It's something that Andy Farrell's attack has always been really good at. Squeezing the space and then reopening it, stretching it like the old French team used to do as well. And they do an exceptional job of that here. They load 7-on-4 onto this blind side. And critically, Gibson Park hits the last man out in Josh van der Fleer here. And it's a lovely ball by van der Fleer on the back of this, because he looks like he wants to accelerate and carry like hard into that Welsh line. Very similar to what we were saying about Oshajegu the other week for France playing against Wales. And he just lifts it out the back. And Jacob Stockdale's touch on this ball is absolutely gorgeous. Really quick hands onto Jack Conan on the wing. Conan gets kind of scrag tackled by Dav Jenkins, and he somehow gets this offload into Jameson Gibson Park, who shows this weird like Dupont level of strength as he barrels into Thomas Williams onto the try line, manages to stay on his feet and present the ball back.
Williams commits a very clear yellow card offence,
Yeah.
if you look at it carefully. The ball then comes out, and Ireland are very fast on playing this. Like, there's only really one or two carries before they're instantly throwing out the back. And this is the value of the classic Andy Farrell system, right? Is you get dummy runners in place at all times. That all these players are initially realistic options, and then as it goes on, as the play moves behind, they all remain as blockers. And Lewis Rees-Zammit here has a chance to drift outside Tadhg. However, he doesn't take it fast enough. And it means that maybe it's the acceleration that's gone since leaving to the NFL, I don't know. But it means that Tadhg can then block him getting on the outside. And that means that basically, right, Adams is forced to come in, and instead of Rees-Zammit drifting out and allowing Adams to get out one, and therefore the pass going over the top to Balogun, it just means that because Rees-Zammit's been taken out of the game once already, Osborne can go over himself. Like, this Irish attack just reduces Wales's ability to force them to make the extra pass, right? Because the moment you're throwing that long pass, it might drift forward, it might go into touch, you might get it wrong ever so slightly if you're doing it under pressure. Ireland just want to simplify this try as much as possible. They know the space is there, but they want to do everything they can with this set move to make sure that they're scoring it quickly rather than needing that extra ball.
The key detail is what Tadhg does after he knows he's not getting the ball. Again, that is an incredibly unselfish player right there. And he gets in the way because he's a big bloke. Like, you've got to physically work around him. And as you mentioned, he makes that job as hard for Rees-Zammit and Eddie James as physically possible. But without it being a clear obstruction, you know. This isn't something you could penalise.
No.
No, he's just in the way. He's just stood there. He doesn't have to change his line.
Standing his ground.
Yeah, and having the ability to do that when you know you're not getting the ball, you're not scoring yourself, as I say, like, that's a brilliant team player and somebody who really thinks about the game in Tadhg.
Yeah, which is the thing Ireland have throughout this team. It's just proper test match players who knew how to close this game out. And they ground Wales away. And this Welsh team, I think there's a little bit of... Steve Tandy's doing a magnificent job, and I cannot ask any more. I think he's doing this incredibly smartly and building the team up slowly. He wasn't expecting results from the start, and he's now getting to a place where, you know, the thing Dowie Lake said about how Tandy was very clear with them that the Scotland game is now their benchmark. Like, they don't dip below that. That's the worst performance they can now put in, is like that level. And I think that was incredibly kind of smart in the way they built this up and everything you mentioned about the game plan. However, the one criticism I would have is they used the bench.
Yes.
So Wales had 2 unused subs in this game. And this was such a close game where the forwards were being asked to do so much work and eventually were ground down and weren't getting there in time. Wales could have gone 7-1. So they had Thomas Williams in the bin, and Kieran Hardy, since Steve Tandy took over, right, has been on the bench in that 21 or 22 jersey 7 out of 8 games, and he has played a total of 30 minutes, which is an average of 3.5 minutes per game. Like, he's not using him. He's not trusting him. Like, the most minutes he's played is 14, and that was once. Like, he's barely getting over 5 minutes here, and he's being an unused sub repeatedly. And if you're not going to use him, and you're not going to use Jared Evans as your other, replacement halfback, then put an extra forward on the bench. Then use those properly. Beside the fact that when Thomas Williams was in the bin, I think there was a real chance like they should have just brought a winger off. Because I've seen, look, for some reason, Kieran Hardy and Ruben Morgan-Williams picked up a lot of yellow cards over the last few years for the Ospreys. I've seen Dan Ed play 9 like 4 or 5 times now, and he's not very good at it.
No.
He's a brilliant player. I thought he had a very good game, and there was like an early error, like the most Dan Ed's thing in the world. He shook that off and was like instantly like excellent, for the rest of the game and just like really calmly in control of the game. However, he's not a good scrum half. Certainly international level, and he meant the Wales attack ground to a halt, and they essentially needed to just wind the clock down for 10 minutes when they needed to strike back and score a try to get back in this game. And they could have brought Hardy on, and I thought that was a baffling decision, and then not using him at all was even more baffling.
So Thomas Williams gets his yellow card on the 66th minute, I want to say. So that means that there are only 4 minutes left of the game by the time he comes back on. If you're not going to bring on Hardy for that when Thomas Williams is in the sin bin and you need a scrum half, you're not planning to bring him on at all. So why put him on the bench? And I get because you need a scrum half in case somebody gets injured, whatever. This was that scenario. If your backup plan of Thomas Williams isn't available is we're going to just move Dan Edwards in and that be it, right? Put another forward on the bench. South Africa did it in the last World Cup final where they didn't put a scrum half on the bench. They were willing to take that risk because they wanted more power that they could bring on. As you say, it's a waste of a slot on the bench when Ireland, as I say, they have such a powerful pack and I know that like set piece was very back and forth in this game, but in terms of the carrying game, Ireland are relentless, Tries like Jack Conan's try, like they happen like most weeks, You need a bit of firepower that can come off the bench and counter that.
You can't tell me that having the option to bring Jared Evans on if the game changes, which it didn't, right? And they played the game that Wales were hoping and expecting to do, but Jared Evans is there in case they fall way behind and he can come on and pull some strings and kind of create some magic. You can't tell me that is a more valuable option if you're expecting to play the way they did than having Harry Deeves to come on and bring more energy,
sure.
Than having an extra second row, be it, obviously Rhys Davies is injured at the minute, but, then putting Freddie Thomas on the bench, and having some extra energy. Because, like, Dav Jenkins has worked so hard week on week. Like, he must have been blowing by the end of that game.
The other thing is, like, regardless of how well Dan Edwards played, in the first couple of games of this Six Nations, Jared Evans came on and changed the attacking picture. Now, the defence of Wales was brilliant. The attack still isn't great. Like, it wasn't making clean line breaks. And that was the same in the first couple of games. Jared Evans then comes on. They start moving forward straight away. And they didn't roll the dice and take that risk on that potentially happening this week. And that was something I kind of thought was a little bit of a missed opportunity when, even if it was just for the last 5 minutes, to just see, because as we've said many times on this channel, like, Jared Evans is a really good number 22. And even if Dan Edwards had the game of his life, I still think at that point, if the attack's not necessarily making breaks or anything, you still want to take a punt on seeing what Jared Evans can do, bring him on that 10 channel. And as I say, like, you either want Kieran Hardy in the squad or you don't, and you can't afford... International rugby is such fine margins at this point, and the bench is so important to it that you can't just have a 6-man bench, you can't risk that.
I also think there's a little bit of like Kieran Hardy fits the profile of what this Wales team is trying to do better than Thomas Williams. In terms of he's a better box kicker, he's defensively kind of, both of them are excellent, but like, kind of flies out of line a little bit more. And that is more valuable to what Wales are doing, right? He's a more accurate box kicker.
I think Tom Williams did defend very well in this game, but I do agree that he has mishit a few box kicks in this tournament.
And I think there's an argument here over whether they just need to be looking at Hardy as someone who fits the game plan rather than like, even though Thomas Williams is their best available player at the minute, well as
an infinitely better player.
But that's a question mark. However, how good does it feel as a Welsh fan to be talking about this rather than whatever Richie Colliquy was up to this week?
Yes.
Like, rather than going like, oh, the W's for another scandal out, you're going, actually, should we be using the bench differently? Like,
what's that? We've got multiple good players who can play in this position at a given time.
I know.
That's nice.
I know. Yeah. So overall, right, from a Welsh point of view, would have liked to win the game, but from a performance POV, very happy.
The biggest compliment was the fact that Jack Crowley had to kick that penalty at the end of the game to guarantee that Ireland had won that. And, that was kind of a bit of a sign of respect. Like, you know what? We've earned the right to have called this a proper test match.
Yeah. as Andy Farrell said afterwards. And from an Irish point of view, that was very much job done, right? Bonus
Absolutely.
point secured, and they got through the game unscathed and have now come out the other side having won a proper test match. That was a completely different game to the one that England and France had to play at the start of the tournament.
Yeah.
A completely different Welsh team.
I think
And
that's
they
it.
came
It's
through
really easy to look at that context from
Yeah.
an Irish point of view and say like, oh, we didn't play as well as maybe we should have. And no, I just think honestly scratch that out because like the last 2 weeks, Wales have been a different team to what they
Yeah.
were in the first two. And I do think you've got to give them credit for that and go, fair play to the fact that Ireland like denied Wales even getting a bonus point like that. That we've talked a lot in this video about praising Wales' defence and stuff. Ireland got bonus point out of this. It was 5-0.
Yeah. And, Ireland had their easy beat against like the wooden spoon contenders at Twickenham the other week. So they've got that out of the way already. And now, they can take on a real serious test team in Wales.
Yeah, so I'm sure Irish fans will be very glad that they managed to still get the 5-0 and watch the Rhys Carey try all in one go. Now that the game's over, I hope that everybody appreciates that for what it is because, look, it's already actually to moments of the year.
Yeah.
You see it there.
It's right up there. It's a shame that Italy had to go and beat England because otherwise it would be number one.
I mean,
so
it's
far.
really not a shame that
No, it's not. I'm all right with it.